I fell asleep on my boss's shoulder during a quarterly meeting in front of 12 senior executives. Every single one of them expected her to end me on the spot. She was known for it. Cold, precise, merciless with anyone who fell below her standards. But she didn't move. She didn't flinch. She just sat there, steady like a wall I didn't deserve to lean on. And the words she said to me afterward were nothing I could have prepared for. 2 months later, I walked into her office and put a resignation letter on her desk. She picked it up, looked me in the eye, and tore it in half. But let me start from the beginning. Hey, my name's Emmett Cole. I'm 27 years old and I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment on the east side of Austin, Texas. It's nothing special. Thin walls that let in every sound from the hallway. A kitchenette with a stove that takes 3 tries to light. A window that looks out onto the parking lot below, where someone's car alarm goes off at least twice a week at 2 in the morning. No family waiting when I get home. No one to share dinner with or complain about the day to. Just me, a laptop full of unfinished freelance work. And the constant low hum of the city outside. I graduated from college a few years back with a degree in business administration, decent grades, no connections, and a pile of student debt that follows me around like a shadow with a clipboard. Degrees don't pay off loans, and loans don't care about your GPA, your ambition, or the fact that you haven't slept more than 5 hours in 6 weeks. So I juggle what I can by day. I'm the executive assistant to Clara Ashford, CEO of Ashford Strategy Group, a fast-growing consulting firm that takes up the top 3 floors of a glass tower downtown. By night, I take on whatever side work I can find online, editing reports for small businesses, building slide decks, cleaning up spreadsheets that look like someone threw numbers at a wall. It's not glamorous, but between those gigs and my salary, the debt shrinks a little each month, just enough to keep me from drowning. Not enough to let me breathe. Sleep is something I negotiate with, not something I get. 4 hours is standard. 5 is a luxury. I've forgotten what 6 feels like. If you're the kind of person who knows what it's like to carry weight nobody sees, you're in the right place. Subscribe and stay with us. This story is just getting started. My father, Ray Cole, would have understood the grind. He was an executive driver here in Austin for over 20 years. Drove CEOs to airports, waited in parking garages for hours, opened doors for people who never looked him in the eye. He was invisible by profession and by choice. Never complained, never asked for recognition, just showed up early, stayed late, and kept the car spotless. He taught me one thing above everything else. Do your job so well that nobody notices you're there. That's the mark of a real professional. He said it like a commandment, and I believed it the way you believe something when the person who says it is the only person you trust. Ray got sick when I was 23, worked until his body physically wouldn't let him anymore, kept driving even when he shouldn't have been behind a wheel. The medical bills stacked up faster than either of us could count. He didn't make it to 55, left me with his work ethic, his debts, and a philosophy I've been following ever since, like a man walking a road. Because he doesn't know there's another one at the office. I'm known as the reliable one. Show up early, stay late, make sure everything runs without friction. I don't complain, don't gossip, don't make mistakes if I can help it. My role is straightforward on paper, but sprawling in practice. Manage Clara's packed schedule, prep her for meetings, handle last-minute changes that would make most people's heads spin, set up conference rooms, coordinate between departments that don't like talking to each other, make sure the right documents are in the right hands at the right time, keep the chaos invisible. I've been doing it for a year and a half. It's become second nature. The kind of work where your hands move before your brain catches up. Like breathing. Except breathing doesn't come with a performance review. Clara herself is a force of nature shaped into a business suit. Mid-30s, sharp as a surgical blade with a reputation that enters the room before she does. She's the kind of leader who can silence a table of senior directors with a single look. Decisions always data-driven. Never clouded by emotion. Never softened by sentiment. Short, precise sentences that leave no room for interpretation. In the eyes of the staff, she's not just intimidating. She's a weather system. You check the forecast before you approach her. I've seen her dismantle underperforming VPs in boardrooms without raising her voice. Not with cruelty, but with a clarity so sharp it cuts before you realize you're bleeding. People leave her office looking like they've been through a car wash. Scrub it clean of every excuse they walked in with. Working for her suits me, though. Her directness is refreshing. She tells me what she needs. I deliver. No blurred lines, no pretending we're friends, no awkward birthday cake in the break room. It's clean, efficient, predictable, and that's how I like my life. Controlled. Without the mess of letting people in. My father would have approved of every part of this arrangement. Stay useful. Stay invisible. Don't make it about you. That philosophy held perfectly until a Thursday afternoon in the middle of summer. The kind of Austin day where the heat outside hits you like opening an oven, and the air conditioning inside fights back so hard the conference room feels like a meat locker. That's when everything started to unravel. And it started with my head landing somewhere it absolutely should not have been. The quarterly strategy meeting was in the top floor conference room. Long mahogany table surrounded by 14 people. Senior directors, VPs from finance and operations, the head of marketing, 2 analysts who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Laptops humming, coffee going cold in ceramic mugs, voices overlapping as they debated expansion plans into new markets. The air was thick with tension and projections, and someone's cologne that was doing way too much. Clara sat at the head of the table as always, steering the discussion with her usual precision. I was positioned to her right, laptop open, fingers flying, noting action items, advancing slides, sending real-time email updates to teams not in the room, refilling her water glass when it dipped below half. Standard operating procedure. I'd done meetings like this 100 times before, But this one wouldn't end. 2 hours in, the debate showed no signs of slowing. By hour 3, my body started making decisions my brain hadn't approved. The night before had been brutal. I'd finished at the office around 8, gone home, and immediately dove into a freelance project. A 40-page report edit that a client needed by 6 in the morning. I worked until almost 3, crashed face down on my bed for maybe 90 minutes, and was back up at 5:30 to review Clara's briefing notes and prep the conference room materials. My eyes burned like someone had rubbed sand behind my lids. My head felt packed with wet concrete. A dull ache throbbed at the base of my skull like a metronome counting down to something I couldn't stop. I propped my chin on my hand, telling myself it was temporary. Just push through the fog. 10 more minutes. But the white fluorescent lights blurred into a smear. The voices around the table melted into a low, distant hum like a television left on in another room. And before I could catch myself, my head tilted sideways. Slowly, quietly. Not a dramatic collapse or a slam into the table. Just a gradual lean until my temple came to rest fully against Clara Ashford's shoulder. The room went dead silent. The kind of silence that has physical weight. 1 second, the directors were mid-debate about quarterly risk margins. The next, every pair of eyes in that room was locked on us. I could feel it before I understood it. The held breaths. The frozen hands. Coffee cup suspended halfway to lips. Here was the invisible assistant. The guy nobody thought about twice. Asleep on the shoulder of the most intimidating CEO in Austin's business scene. Nobody moved. Nobody coughed. Nobody reached for their phone. It was as if the room had collectively decided to hold still and watch what happened next. Because everyone knew what should happen next. Clara Ashford didn't tolerate lateness, let alone someone using her as a pillow during a strategy review. But in those few impossibly long seconds, she didn't flinch. She didn't shove me away or snap my name. She just sat there. Her posture perfectly straight, her shoulder steady under my head as if she decided to allow it. Or at least to not react. For reasons nobody in that room could fathom, I woke up with a jolt, heart hammering against my ribs, eyes snapping open to a room full of faces staring at me like I'd just walked in naked. The disorientation lasted maybe 2 seconds before the full horror landed. I was in a boardroom. I'd been sleeping. On her dot, my father's voice rang in my skull like an alarm. Nobody notices you're there. Well, everyone was noticing now. Heat flooded my face. Humiliation and panic hitting simultaneously like a 2-car collision. I opened my mouth to apologize, but my throat was a dessert, and the words were stuck somewhere behind my sternum dot. Clara turned her head toward me slowly. Those sharp eyes found mine with an intensity that made me brace for impact. This was it. Career over. Dignity gone. Everything I'd built, however small, about to be swept away because my body chose the worst possible moment to shut down. But instead of the reprimand every person in that room was bracing for, she addressed them. We'll pause here. Resume tomorrow, same time. The meeting dissolved instantly. Directors gathered their laptops and folders in stunned silence, filing out without a word, leaving behind a quiet that rang louder than anything they'd been debating. The door clicked shut. Just us. Me, still frozen in my chair, pulse racing. Clara, who hadn't moved an inch. I waited for the storm. My mind was already composing apologies, excuses, a resignation speech if it came to that. But when she spoke, it wasn't what I'd prepared for. She leaned back slightly, her gaze steady, and asked, "How long have you been sleeping like this?" Not anger, not discipline, a question about my sleep. And something between us shifted. Subtle, quiet, but real. I tried to lie. Rough night, nothing serious. She cut me off. I've been watching you for weeks. You arrive before everyone. Leave after everyone. You always say you're fine. But you're not fine, Emmett. You're burning out. Pushed against the wall by someone who clearly wasn't accepting a deflection. I admitted it. Hadn't been sleeping properly for over a month. The freelance was necessary. Loans, rent, the last of my father's medical bills. I kept it brief. I didn't turn it into a sob story. That's not how Ray raised me. But the truth was heavier spoken out loud than it had ever been inside my head. Clara listened without interrupting. When I finished, she nodded once. Go home. Sleep at least 8 hours. That's not a suggestion. I couldn't tell if I was being saved or dismissed. But her voice left zero room for negotiation. So I gathered my things and left, head spinning the entire drive home. I'd prepared for a firing. I got concern disguised as an order. That was the first crack in something I hadn't known was sealed shut. The next morning. I arrived expecting fallout. Clara walked past my desk with nothing more than a nod. Relief hit first, then suspicion. Mid-morning, she called me in for our daily briefing. The first thing she asked had nothing to do with the agenda. Did you sleep? I confirmed. Full night. First one in weeks. She gave a curt good and moved on to business. But as the day unfolded, I started noticing things. My schedule had been rearranged. Early morning calls pushed back by an hour. 2 non-essential recurring tasks reassigned to other teams. Her emails, which used to arrive at midnight like clockwork, stopped coming after 10. When a late session was unavoidable, my start time the next day was quietly adjusted to compensate. At first, I told myself it was coincidence. Maybe she was restructuring workloads across the board. But the changes were too specific, too targeted, to be anything but intentional. She was lightening my load without saying a word about it. No announcement. No conversation. Just quiet, deliberate adjustments that gave me room to breathe for the first time in months. It was strange. Almost unsettling. Clara wasn't the type to coddle anyone. She expected excellence and had zero patience for excuses. Yet here she was, recalibrating my world in the background, like someone adjusting the temperature in a room without being asked. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I went home before 9 o'clock 2 nights that week. Collapsed into bed without freelance deadlines hanging over me. The ceiling above my bed looked different when I wasn't staring at it at 3 in the morning wondering how long I could keep this up. It looked like just a ceiling, and that felt like a miracle dot. Then came the evening that changed things further. The office had emptied, but I was still at my desk fine-tuning a presentation for the next day's board meeting. The kind of detailed work that couldn't be rushed. Clara emerged from her office around 8, briefcase in hand, coat over her arm. She paused when she saw me. "You're still here?" I told her it would just be another hour. Nothing major. She studied me for a moment, then asked something that crossed a line we'd never approached. "Is there anyone at home waiting for you?" The question sat in the air like something fragile placed on a table. I hesitated, then told her the truth. No, nobody. No family nearby. No partner. Just an apartment that was quiet in the way places are quiet when there's no one to make noise in them. She nodded. "Go home. Get rest." I started to argue. She raised one hand, barely an inch, and I stopped mid-sentence. I went home. The next morning, I opened the presentation file. It was finished. Every remaining section completed with her unmistakable precision. Clean formatting. Sharp transitions. Notes in the margins that showed she'd not only edited, but improved it. She'd stayed late to do my work so I could sleep. For someone who guarded her time the way a dragon guards gold, that wasn't just a nice gesture. It was a sacrifice. And it told me something about how she saw me that no words could have. From there, the shifts came in small, steady increments. She started asking my opinion on things beyond logistics. Strategy questions. How to handle a media situation. Whether a certain director was ready for more responsibility. These weren't token consultations. She listened. She pushed back when she disagreed. She incorporated my input when it held up. For the first time in my career, I felt like more than a well-organized shadow. I felt like someone whose judgment mattered, and I began to see something about Clara that most people in the building never would. Her world was isolated, profoundly, quietly isolated. She was surrounded by ambitious executives, seasoned directors, advisors, and consultants who nodded and smiled and agreed with everything she said. But trust? Real trust? That was rare. She didn't let people close. She couldn't afford to. The few times she had, it had cost her. She told me about it one evening when we were both working late. Not as a confession, more like a fact she'd been carrying that had gotten too heavy to hold alone. Her marriage. Her ex-husband who'd told her she was too cold to lead, too rigid to connect. She'd built Ashford's strategy group from nothing to prove him wrong. And she had. But the armor she'd forged in that fire had never come off. Not for colleagues. Not for friends. Not for anyone. Until the day a guy who was supposed to be invisible fell asleep on her shoulder and she realized she didn't want to push him away. She said that part quietly, almost to herself, and I almost missed it. But I didn't. Have you ever had someone quietly rearrange the world around you so you could finally breathe, and then realize they needed the same thing and had no one to do it for them? If you know what that feels like, drop the word "seen" in the comments. Just that one word. I'd love to know how many of us have been carrying everything alone until someone finally noticed. But as the connection grew, so did the complications. Slowly at first, then all at once like a crack spreading through glass. Colleagues began to notice. It started with glances in the break room that lasted a beat too long. Conversations that went quiet when I walked past. Then came the indirect jabs. An email from operations questioning why certain tasks had been shifted off my workload. Whispered comments in the hallways that weren't quite whispered enough. "He's got her ear now. Must be nice to nap on the job and get a raise. The shoulder thing really paid off, huh?" A week later, HR circulated a company-wide memo. Reminder on professional boundaries. Policies on superior-subordinate interactions. Conflicts of interest. The importance of impartiality. It wasn't addressed to anyone by name. It didn't need to be. I printed it and took it to Claire's office. She glanced at it and set it aside. "I received the same," she said. "The way you'd say, it's raining." That afternoon, the wall went back up. Higher than before. Clara reverted to full professional distance overnight. Midnight emails returned. My schedule filled to bursting. She stopped asking about my sleep, my well-being, my thoughts on anything beyond immediate tasks. Our interactions became surgical. Assignment, deadline, acknowledgement. Nothing more. I understood why. Self-preservation, protecting us both from the growing scrutiny. But understanding the logic didn't fill the void it left. The days felt heavier than they had before. She'd ever adjusted my schedule. Not from overwork this time. From the absence of being seen. The connection had been quiet and brief, but it had been the only thing in my life that made the grind feel survivable. And now it was gone. My father's philosophy echoed louder than ever. "Do your job so well nobody notices you?" Well, I'd been noticed, and the world had punished us both for it. 2 weeks of that. 2 weeks of pretending nothing had changed, while everything felt off balance. The rumors didn't fade. Walsh's comment replayed on a loop, and slowly a thought formed that I couldn't shake. Staying was hurting her more than helping her. Her reputation was her armor, and I was the crack in it. Over the weekend, I wrote my resignation. Clean, professional. 2 weeks notice. Gratitude for the opportunity. No hard feelings. I told myself it was the right move. For her, the whispers would stop. For me, a fresh start without the daily pretense of not caring about someone I cared about more than. I'd admitted to myself. But as I typed the last sentence, something landed in my chest that I hadn't expected. This wasn't just leaving a job. This was walking away from the first person since my father who'd looked past my "I'm fine" and done something about what she saw underneath. Monday morning. Letter printed. Envelope sealed. I walked into her office with my spine straight and my jaw locked. "I'm resigning. Effective in 2 weeks." Clara stared at the envelope on her desk. The room was silent except for the low hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of the city through the window behind her. She stared at it long enough that I started to wonder if she'd heard me. Then she stood, walked around the desk, picked up the envelope, and tore it in half, slowly, deliberately. Let the pieces drift to the floor like two white leaves. "You don't get to decide what damages me," she said. Her voice cracked. Not dramatically. Just enough. The tiniest fracture in a surface that had been flawless for years. For the first time, the CEO disappeared. Standing in front of me was a woman who'd spent years proving she was strong enough to stand alone, and had just realized she didn't want to anymore. She told me she didn't want me to leave. Not for the workflow. Not for the convenience. Because this mattered. "This," she said, gesturing between us, "is important." The word filled the room. I held her eyes. "If I stay and we keep pretending there's nothing here, what's the point of me being around?" Silence. Long enough to hear both of us breathing. Then, quiet but certain. Then stop pretending. What followed wasn't a kiss or an embrace. That wasn't us. What followed was a conversation. The most honest one I'd ever had. I told her I couldn't work this close to her every day while pretending what I felt was professional. Her concern, those adjustments, they'd open something in me I couldn't seal back up. It wasn't about the job. It was about her seeing me in a way nobody had since my father. She didn't deflect. Told me I was different. I didn't angle for favors. Didn't play politics. I was just there, steady, present, and that steadiness had worn through her defenses without her realizing it. She'd started those changes not from pity, but because she'd come to need my presence in a way. That caught her off guard, but she set the terms. No hiding, no office affair. They'd report to HR, restructure his role, and handle whatever backlash came from the honesty. Clean, transparent. I agreed, but added my own condition. Nothing casual. My life was already a grind. If we moved forward, it had to be with intention. I didn't have the energy to build something that would collapse the first time it got hard. She smiled. Small and real, the kind that softened her entire face and made the office feel less like an office. "Good," she said. "I don't do halfway either." Then she pulled a folder from her desk drawer. Inside was a proposal she'd written weeks ago. A new position. Director of Operational Coordination. Reporting to the executive team, not directly to her. Higher salary. Broader scope. Real autonomy. It wasn't a demotion or a consolation prize. It was a step up. "I didn't want you stuck as my shadow forever," she said, her voice steady but laced with something protective. "You deserve to stand on your own, not be remembered as the guy who got ahead because of me." She'd been thinking about my future, protecting my trajectory, making sure that whatever grew between us wouldn't limit what I could become. That quiet foresight, that invisible investment in someone else's potential, dissolved the last wall I had left. We went to HR that afternoon. Forms signed. Policies reviewed. Transition planned over 2 weeks. Clinical, almost boring, but solid. No drama. No impulsiveness. Just two adults building something the right way. Word spread through the office like it always does. Raised eyebrows. Pointed questions. Walsh made one more remark in a team huddle that landed flat when nobody laughed. Because the results were already speaking. My operational improvements in the first month saved the company 2 project delays and 1 client escalation. Merit is hard to argue with. Outside the office, we built slowly. Dinners at quiet spots. The Thai restaurant on South Congress for pad see ew and iced tea. Walks around Lady Bird Lake on evenings when the heat finally broke and the water reflected the city lights like a second sky. Clara outside the office was a revelation. Less armored, more hesitant. She'd fidget with her napkin when talking about things that mattered. She'd laugh at my terrible jokes, the kind that don't deserve a laugh but get one anyway. Because the person likes you enough to give it. She shared pieces of her life in fragments. The loneliness of leadership. The isolation of being the person everyone looks to but nobody really knows. The marriage that had almost convinced her she wasn't built for connection. I shared mine. The loans. The empty apartment. My father's philosophy that I'd followed like scripture, without ever asking if it was true. Sometimes we'd just sit in comfortable silence, her head resting against my shoulder. On purpose this time. No conference room, no audience. Just us. 6 months later, another quarterly meeting. Same conference room, same long table, same fluorescent lights. But this time, I wasn't the assistant in the corner managing slides. I was at the table, presenting, coordinating, holding my own among directors, who 6 months ago didn't know my name. Near the end, the tiredness hit. Not the crushing kind from before. The kind that comes from doing work that matters. The good weight of a week spent building something real. Clara was at the front, commanding the room. As she passed behind my chair to gesture at the screen, her hand rested on my shoulder for exactly 1 second. Light, brief, invisible to anyone not watching for it. But I felt it. All the way through. The meeting ended. The team filed out. She lingered by my chair. "You okay?" she asked, quiet enough that only I could hear. I nodded with a small smile. "Yeah, the good kind of tired." "That's acceptable," she said, and the corner of her mouth turned up just barely. We walked out together, side by side, not rushing, not hiding. The hallway was bright and ordinary, and for the first time, ordinary felt like enough. My father spent his whole life believing that the highest form of professionalism was disappearing. Do your job so well that nobody notices you're there. I followed that philosophy for 27 years. Through school, through grief, through debt, through exhaustion that made the walls blur at 3 in the morning. And for most of those years, it kept me safe. But sitting in that conference room, with Claire's hand still warm on my shoulder and my name on a door, I'd earned and a life that finally had someone in it who wanted to be there. I understood something my father never got the chance to learn. Being invisible keeps you safe. But being seen is what keeps you alive.